Recording in progress.
This meeting is being recorded.
In this video and this conversation, we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about the relationship with your inner self, or the relationship with our inner selves. So I'll talk for a few minutes on what I see about that subject, and then feel free to share, ask questions, join in the conversation, but also feel free to sit back and relax, and just, as I used to say to people in prison, if you want to go to sleep at the back of the class, that's fine with me. So yeah, you can go to sleep. I won't be offended. In fact, I'll be probably flattered if you did that. But I'll also be very happy if you stay awake. So I want to speak about this subject, the relationship with our inner self, from a quite a pragmatic point of view, because it's something that's very close to my heart, in that it looked like a struggle. Like to me, when people said, love yourself, or you have to love yourself before you can love somebody else, I couldn't think that. How could I love myself? I did not like the person that I saw in the mirror. I didn't like the shape or the look of the person that I saw in the mirror, but I also rarely looked into the eyes of that person in the mirror, because to me, what I saw beneath the vibrant, energetic, bubbly personality was broken and damaged. And how can you love that? You know, that's what I used to think. I'd look and I'd think, how can you love that? And for a really long time, I actually realized later on that I didn't even look into my own eyes. You know, I'd brush my hair and do my makeup and get out of that mirror as quickly as possible, and avoid mirrors at all costs. And then I'll tell you the story. You may have read about it, but I'll tell you the story briefly because it just sets the scene. And before I tell you the story, I'm going to say how we find that inner self is bespoke to everybody. So you can't find it by listening to what I did and then doing what I do, or listening to what Derek did and do what he does, or Daz or Mark or anybody else on here. It will be bespoke to you, and you almost can't find it by looking. But I will give you a little hint at the end, so keep watching. So I didn't have a good relationship with my father. I grew up in a very traumatic, violent household, neglected, abused, just everything really. And that continued all my life. So even though I wasn't living with my father, I was petrified of him. So whenever he contacted me, which he did from time to time, I would get all sorts of feelings of fear and wanting to please and wanting to be loved, and anxiety, and a whole cocktail of unhappy feelings. And we'd have our interactions, and on and off over the years. Some of those would be nice and some of them wouldn't be so nice. So even into my 30s, my dad was a bully, to say the least. So I was 39 years old. I was about to have a hysterectomy. I had enormous fibroids in my body, that had to be removed. And my son, who was 16 at the time, got scared and wanted help, wanted my dad to come and help, and wrote to him and said, you know, your daughter's having a hysterectomy and you need to help her. You need to be there for her. And my dad, whose name is was Peter, he called me up and he said, I can't visit you. My wife would be really jealous if I was to visit you. And so all of a sudden on this phone call, I thought, what a weird thing. Like, his wife would be jealous. She wasn't my mum. And I said, right, okay. And I was disappointed and so on. And then he said, he shockingly to me, he said, bleep this out if you don't like swearing. I love you, you bastard. And I put the phone down and I looked in the mirror and I thought, you crazy woman, you're nearly 40 and you've allowed this relationship with this very strange man to influence your whole life, your whole relationships, everything. I had either I'd have violent relationships when I was younger, and at that time I had relationships where they weren't violent, but they were emotionally abusive, mentally abusive. And I just looked at myself and I thought, just stop it. You're nearly 40, grow up. And overnight, I stopped attracting abusive people. Only nice people came into my life. Only kind people who wanted to be nice to me or, you know, treat me well. And I was really shocked because all my life I'd thought those were the only men that I could be with. So it's taken a little bit longer than I thought. But fast forward a few years, and I think maybe 5 years, and we'd moved. Me and my son had moved. We've moved to another location, and Peter Bennett, who was my dad, didn't know where we were, but he tracked me down, and he was dying of cancer, and he wanted a relationship, and he wanted to be forgiven. He wanted to, his words were, I want you to be 3 again and we'll start again. And he asked me to come back into his life. He asked me to be around. And I remember when I made the decision, I had the sort of night of the long knives, and I thought, if I do this, I've got to do it with an open heart. I've got to go in and see him for himself. I didn't know anything about any understanding. I just knew that I needed to go into it with an open heart. And so I did. And it was a rocky 5 months. We both tried. My son tried. We tried to have a relationship with him. We even went to Australia to see our family. And I have to do that because that's what we used to do when we say Australia. Thank you. And we really, all 3 of us, and the several girlfriends that he had, all tried. But it was hard, and you can't just wipe away 40 years. And we all struggled in our own different ways. So anyway, he got sicker, and the 3 girlfriends that he had, I put them onto like care duty as he got sicker. So different girlfriends looking after him at different times. And one of them, and he lived about 30 miles away from me, and one of them called me up and said, I think you better come. I think he's really ill. So I went along, and he was still being an old goat, you know. He was like stroppy with everybody and throwing his toys out the pram, but he was dying. I could see that. And my internal project manager switched on. So I got him sorted out, got him into hospital, went through all the forms, all of these things. I didn't know so many things about him. I didn't know what faith to put down. Things about him that I just had no idea. Anyway, we went through all this process, and he was there, and people came and visited, and little girlfriends came and wiped his mouth, and they were all loving over him. And I looked at him and thought, excuse me 1 minute, Derek, can you put the link in the Vibe group? Thank you. I looked at him and thought, it's horrible. Like, how can they bear to touch him, this gnarly old goat in the bed? But I was just doing what needed to be done, really. And there came a point where the doctors called me in and asked me to sign the do not resuscitate forms. And I thought, I don't even know this bloke, and I've basically got to let him die. But anyway, they said, that was the best thing to do. So I did that. And they put him onto palliative care. And by this time he was just breathing. He wasn't conscious. Or he wasn't knowingly conscious. And he was lying in a bed, and they put him into this undulating bed to stop bed sores. And there was some morphine or some sort of pain killers going through to keep him out of pain. But they stopped feeding him, and they were allowing him to natural causes to take their toll. And when I'd packed his bag to take him to the hospital, I'd swooped up a book off the bedside table, and I was, everything had settled down. I'd been in the hospital now, around about 48 hours, 50 hours. And I sat beside his bed, and I said, right. And I knew that he had been fighting the cancer. He felt like his work wasn't finished. In his older years, he was only 60, by the way, but in his older years, he'd repented. He'd realized that he hadn't been a very good person, and he'd done all sorts of things, all sorts of therapies, and he wanted to find peace before he died. But he thought he could fight the cancer somehow, and it somehow, it wasn't a case of being positive. It was more of a, it was him. It was more of a, right, no, you bugger, I'll get you. With the cancer, he wasn't peaceful at all. So I sat beside him. I said, right, I'm going to read whatever this claptrap is in this book. I'm going to read it to you, because you've obviously been reading it. It's just here, I think. In fact, it is just here. It was this book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, by Dr. Wayne Dyer, Living the Wisdom of the Day. And I'd never ever seen this before. So I just opened it at different pages and read him different verses. And I said, I'm going to read to you till you let go, because you need to let go. It's okay. And you're not alone. I wanted him to know he wasn't alone. And it wasn't a daughter-father thing. It was a human-to-human thing, that's all. And I held his hand, and he lay there, and I read. And my son texted me and said, how you doing? And he said, get some sleep. And I said, no, I'm okay. I'm going to stay with him until he's gone. And my son said, well, why don't you kick someone out of the bed, and sleep in their bed? They probably wouldn't even notice. And so I told Peter Bennett this, and he laughed. I went, you just laughed. And I texted my son again and I said, he just laughed. And he said, well, he won't laugh when he finds out it's him you're kicking out, will he? So I told him and he laughed again. So I said, you old bugger, you can hear me. So I am definitely not leaving now. I'm going to read to you until you feel safe enough to let go. So you're stuck with me because you can't get away from me. So I held his hand and I read these verses and just paused, and the nurses came in and out. And at some point during the night, an overwhelming feeling came over me of being sorry for the relationship that was not had, and for the things that hadn't been said and things that had been said, and for whatever my part in it was. And so I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry. And he lifted his hand with mine in it and brought it up to his chest. And to me, it sounded like the air that came out of his breath said, I'm sorry too. But I don't remember now whether he actually did that or not. So I kept reading and there was no further reactions from him. He just kept breathing. And the next morning, all the tribe came, the family and the girlfriends and the various people who were also people from my past that I didn't really want to be with. And I went into his little toilet area, bathroom to wash up, because I'd been there 72 hours by now, with no sleep and no makeup. My hair was lank. You probably know what hospitals are like. And I went in and I looked in the mirror. And in the mirror was the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. And I just looked at her and I said, who are you? and the moment was gone. And later that day he died, and there's more stories around that. Now, I didn't know at the time, but the sense I make of it now was that was my true self. Beneath the barriers and the boundaries and the who I am and who I'm not, and in the moment, the magical moment of forgiveness between us, two human beings, my true self somehow showed itself to me. And I saw my essence in a glimpse. And that's what started this journey for me of finding out about the innate health, of working with people in prison, of mending my relationships with my family, my son in particular. That's what started that journey. And I am so grateful that I got to see her. So just a few words on, of course, that's not the only way to see our true selves, but the fact that it's there. Because I knew when I saw that, I knew if I see pure essence in me, it's in everybody. I went a bit deeper than I intended to go, so sorry about that. I'd love to hear from anybody if you want to share anything, or I hope that was okay. Oh, thank you.
Someone you going to share?
No, just thumbs up.
I think that was beautiful, MamaJ, man. That was again, for me, one of them stories that I've heard, but it's I felt it new just now when you was telling me it. And You know, when you're like listening to a story and I'm thinking, where are we gonna go? What am I gonna see? And then all of that again just cleared when the feeling hit me. Yeah, like we get in our heads in it, thinking, oh, what do I have to do to make this feeling come? What do I have to do to make this feeling come? And then over there, I'll see the feeling. And only when I drop that thinking of what do I have to do I really understand the feeling. And you kind of brought me to that space where I see my first insight, Mama J, because I've had to go back and look on that, and because just from that one moment, so much things have changed for me, and I don't have to go back to that one moment to go to seek the change. It's unfolding every moment new, but it all stemmed from that moment. And I can so much liken it to what you just said, Mama J, when you looked in that mirror and you just saw beyond all personal attachments to yourself. And I've seen that in myself when I had that glimpse, and man, it's profound, it's profound. It's before I just put it down to what I had a thought and it just said, yeah, but I've really had to look into what the hell did you see? What is it what the hell's kickstarted this? And the most I can put it down to is in that glimpse, I sort of, like you said, but before all that personal attachment, who I thought I should be, who I was, the image, everything else, and that sort of freedom that I felt from that. It's funny that it must have been the biggest thing on that list that I didn't like was the criminality part of it. And that's what I brought back. That, I don't have to be a criminal. What? Everything else I just saw in Technicolor, forget all that. I don't have to be a criminal. And that's like the first, but I had to detach myself from everything who I thought I was to see that. And that's what I was running with. And it's only when I've come out and been living my life, I've seen how many micro attachments I have about myself. And only when I tackle them individually from that same space where I saw it possible. But that is the glimpse that I saw. And it was so much reminded me of when you said that, when you looked in that mirror, MamaJ. And for me, it's like that same thing, looking as well, like that personal thought that we have of ourselves. And everything I've ever done in life has been centered around my personal beliefs or my ego. And to know that not necessarily doesn't have to, what might made up, but to know that it necessarily didn't have to be so. All of the things I thought I was about myself, I can let go of. Just like the criminality thing, I'm not doing that no more, so I've let that go. And just like everything else, I think I am. And even to get a bit deeper again, do you know, because they was talking something the other day and I was listening to it, and you know, when they say about to be a man and to be and then there's this thing that says that we are more than the sum of our parts. So what does it mean to be a man? To have a set of nuts and a celery stick? Is that what it takes? But it doesn't, because if you cut them off, then you're still not a man. So what we've actually attached ourselves to, we don't have to attach ourselves to none of that. But yet it seems to mean so much. But in the infinite way we're talking, it means nothing. It means nothing. And if you can see before that, then that opens up all possibilities and all potential, and everything comes from that space for me. And I only had to glimpse it for a second to know that it's possible. So all of that Technicolor, I came back with just the criminality, but all of that Technicolor, what I know is there, I've been slowly looking and not trying to find it, but just know that there's a bit more to it than not being a criminal. Like I know there's a bit more to it to being a father than just putting down money. I know there's a bit more to relationships, just as expecting the other person to be giving. I know all of those things. I know there's another side to absolutely everything, and not just one side, a myriad of sides. But yeah, I love that talk about going beyond that personal, and I've even realized that anything that anyone said to me that's upset me, that's talking to that personal me. Anything, you're talking to that personal me. And I even had this analogy I see, you see, like, so all my life I've been in this little comfortable zone, and it's just been in the middle. And when I get up and move, I might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Or anytime I feel uncomfortable, I go back to that zone. Sorry, 1 second.
Abandoned ship, Derek.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Oh, I lost my train of thought, man. Yeah, so it's like you're in a circumference and you're in the middle, and that was my comfortability. And anytime I venture out from that middle, it's like the unknown. But then the more I venture into it, the more familiar it gets, and I can look back from that space and see that tiny little spot of comfortability, what I used to inhabit. And that is where all of my personal beliefs sit about myself. And when I get frightened or something happens, I jump back there because that's where I know comfortability to be. But when I move around the perimeter, I know that's where I'm meant to be. And that's where that real feeling comes from. And I can, like I said, I can look back in the center and know that there's an intellectual feeling there, but it's not the real feeling. And when I stay on that perimeter, every time I see something past what I think I know, that perimeter gets a little bit wider. And for me, it's about, and that's just one aspect. So it's about patrolling that perimeter, looking for those little cracks. And anytime I see a crack, it expands again. And like I said, anytime I'm on that perimeter and I get upset, my instinct is to jump back into that center. But no, if I know that anytime I'm getting upset, it's something from that center was fueling that upsetness, and I won't find the answer back in there. Does that make sense? So when I see, and I'll tell you something for truth, like how I saw that is at the center of that at the center of that spot of what's me is my blackness, me being a black man. And that is something from the center, I can't see myself detaching from. But as like with the George Floyd thing, when I moved out in the perimeter, I can look back and I can see that if you take that away, there is still something left. I didn't know that. I didn't know that for a long time. And if you get me spooky, I'll jump back into the center. And when I'm back in that center, you can't separate me from it again. You have to wait for me to go back to that space where I can see it. But I've seen it. I've seen it. But, and that's probably the hardest thing. There's so many other things fueling that center. What makes it so warm is our ego, our personal thinking of what we think about ourselves. And when you see it individually, then it can fade or melt away. But anything that ever upsets us comes from what I believe about myself.
I love that. I love that, the heat of the ego as well.
That comfortability, that's why we feel comfortable there. Soothed us it soothed me most of my life.
Yeah. Wow. That's all.
Blimey. I love the island, Derek, and I connect with MamaJ and the words that Derek just used. I too didn't have a great relationship with my father. I still don't. But It wasn't violent. I wish it was at certain points in my life, because I would have killed him. But it was more emotional and negligence and whatever. And you talking about the island just then, Derek, I used to live in. I used love as a weapon for everybody around me to gain things and to gain money or relationships, and then I'd use people because of it. And for whatever reasons, however that ended up happening, I was always angry, and I would pretend to love and use anger and whatever. I don't know if those words are absolutely butchered, but I lived on this island of pure hate, and I protected myself by not letting love out. You know, I mean, that sounds ridiculous to say, because ultimately it would have happened without me being aware of it or not. I didn't have an understanding when I was younger anyway. So, but I always held on to this hate of things that people had done to hurt me, and things that people had said, and things that people hadn't even said. You know, I was hurt by the things that people hadn't said. What ridiculous thing to be hurt by. And I can't even remember how long ago it was now. It's quite recent, but about 12 months ago. I've been on a journey since I've had kids. I've been on a journey, as you do. And I've learnt to love and cherish, and these moments happen in life that I'm not experiencing this love for things, to use this love to gain something later on down the line, which is what I would have done many, many, many times over throughout my life. Use it to gain whatever. And at one point, I sort of realised that I was experiencing love, and I wasn't going to use it for a weapon, and I wasn't trying to gain anything personally from it. And I kind of thought, well, this feels a lot better than anger and grief and resentment, and it feels a hell of a lot better actually. And then I thought, well, when was the last time that me and Tim, my biological father, when was the last time we've actually even connected? And then I didn't even latch on to that thought, because it's irrelevant when the last time that I connected with him was, and what it was over, and whether he was present mentally or whether he was emotionally there or whatever. I just thought, wow, what kind of effort am I making towards that relationship? If I'm holding on to hatred and resentment with him, then I'm too harming that relationship. I will never have a relationship with him because I've decided not to. And that isn't love in my reality now. So almost immediately, like a shed of a skin, I let go of this entire life. I cannot even emphasize how much I detested this man. I had kids, and I was determined to not be him as a father. I mean, I'm me. I'm never going to be him. I'm a completely different person, different experiences. So I reached out to him, and no agenda, no nothing. Just reached out to him and said, I can't even remember. It's just so light-hearted. Sup, dude? Just letting you know I'm available to chat if ever you feel like it. And I had something like that. I had no care at all if he replied, because all I was doing was putting my foot out or putting my hand out, and if he decided to reach back out, then brilliant. And if not, I'm not going to lose anything, because I've already not had a father in my life for my entire life. So what harm can come of it? Anyway, he reached out, and we ended up having I drove 4 hours or 4.5 hours to meet him halfway, and he drove 2, and we spent the day together. And, typical of him actually, we went to a service station, which is so what he would have done when I was a kid anyway. Pick me up and take me to a service station because it's convenient, which is really funny. But yeah, and nothing really has come of it since. I haven't reached out to him to rekindle my lost father or whatever. But just letting go of that hatred has reminded me that, this island that I put myself on, the more love that I feel, the more expansive my world gets. And the more hatred and grief and resentment that I feel, even though those things are natural. If somebody pisses me off, sorry, there's a lot of things to censor in this video. If somebody, I feel those things, but I definitely don't hold on to them anymore. I'm not imprisoned by my island, which is definitely something that I built the prison on the island. I built that. So really good words to hear. I love that.
Wow. Beautiful, Dazzle. Jill?
Hi, haven't seen you for ages. You're right.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
Yeah. This will probably come out rather jumbled. I was just listening to what Derek was saying. I had a woman came to see me. She just wanted some help, and anyway, she'd been really badly abused, and I took her out in the New Forest, and we went down what I call my stream walk, where starts at the beginning of a waterfall where the water's all calm and there's nothing going on and it's very peaceful. And I was talking to her about being in that calm space where nothing's really happening and your thoughts are nice and chilled, and then the water goes down the waterfall and it produces all these bubbles and ripples, and there are big bubbles going down, and those are our thoughts, and and then it calms down again. Then you hit a few more rocks, and that sort of thing about your thoughts and things. And I spent about 4 hours with her. She came back and we had a long chat, and she really looked quite happy when she went. And she messaged me later, really enthusing about it and saying how much I'd helped her and what have you. And instead of feeling sort of quite sort of warm inside, for some reason I went off down that stupid track of thinking. I started thinking about all the things I'd done wrong in my life. Crazy, all the past things that I thought I'd dealt with or got rid of started coming back. And then she messaged again and said that she'd taken a friend of hers out who was feeling a bit down, and she started talking like I had about the stream and things. And I messaged back saying I'm not sure we want to sound like me, but and laughed. And it was weird because at that moment I suddenly felt really calm and warm, and thought perhaps that's the real me. Thinking back to that sort of kindness, love feeling.
No.
Sounds a bit jumbled, I'm sorry, but and I suddenly thought what Derek was saying about and you were saying about seeing yourself as perhaps a beautiful person, and that's what I am underneath it all. And I'm not what I'm labeled or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You're
And it
not
was
what
just
you
lovely,
label.
lovely.
You're
Yeah,
not what you label yourself either.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just a lovely feeling then.
It's beautiful.
I love
Thanks.
that as well, Jill. I have to say the way that when we can have those feelings that you had when you got the first phone call, and then our thinking can just take us somewhere different in an instant to all those other thinking that we had. But it's just knowing to stay with that feeling. Because when you stay with that feeling, you push through and you really confirm to yourself that this is alive in you and it is you. You are able to spread it by just being in nature and just being yourself and just believe in that and trust in that more than the thinking that just rattled through your head seconds earlier.
Absolutely, yeah. It's lovely. Thanks.
I think you're pointing to as well the theme of my story and what I heard in Derek's story and Dazzle's was that actually we start to see our true self when our thinking drops away, and we can never be free of thought. Like that's how we see life. We see life through thought, but we can have less thought on our minds, and there are moments, and it's not when we do it deliberately, it's when we fall asleep, in those moments of bliss, in moments of silence. There are moments throughout our day and throughout our time where our mind falls into a calmer, more rested state. And that's where that true self bubbles up. And that really was highlighted in your story, Jill, because you could see as soon as the storm of thought gets going, then we start to look at ourselves and critique ourselves and critique what we've done and feel less than and all of that. And then when the feeling came back through that phone call, through her talking about the river again, the waterfall again, you know, thought drops away again, and you can feel that essence more in that place. So
Yeah.
it made perfect sense.
Well said. That was better than my version, but yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Mark?
Wow. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and it's good to see Derek and just the people that I really have come to love being around you guys. Even though it's Zoom, I still, you know, when I see that we're doing this, I'm here. So, you know, I was doing a little driving before I came to my office, and I was thinking, wow, loving yourself is really doing nothing but understanding that you already are loved. And then I realized that when I'm being in service to somebody, I disappear and love is there. And isn't that really what listening is? It's just your personal thoughts have died off, and then what remains is love. It's always ready to happen, but you know, then we go back to our thoughts about ourselves, and it's just, and that's natural, and that's okay too. You know, it's just it happens that way. That's the way life is. And your story, Jacqueline, really reminded me of something that happened with my father as he reached the end of his life. And I don't know if I've shared this before. I know I've shared this in other places, but so my father, it was really like in his late 70s, early 80s, started to come down with Alzheimer's. And I had a difficult relationship with him too, and felt kind of to save myself through my life, I kept a distance. I was close and I loved him. I knew I loved him, but there was a lot of pain that occurred. And he was a very tough business person, and you know, he wasn't the type of person that would ever reach out and call me. It was me calling him usually, and that type of thing. And you know, some of my life decisions he was very critical of, and blah blah blah. So what started to happen was that the Alzheimer's began to remove the outer crust of his personality. And I think of it as like the earth has a crust, and then underneath is that beautiful core, right? So slowly but surely, and I would keep in touch with him because I knew time was limited. You know, I knew that, you know, he wasn't going to live forever, and that, you know, each time we saw each other or spoke, and as I started to do that and call him, and you know, like I said, the personality began to disappear, and then what would come out were these just loving conversations, and I remember after each phone call, he would say, "And remember, Mark, I love you." And he would say, "You know, I'm proud of you." You know, he had 4 kids, and he would say, "I went," you know, using baseball terms, "yeah, I went 4 for 4. I batted 1,000. You're all good people." And it's like I just remembered I didn't really hear that when I was growing up. I knew he loved me. I knew he I think he saw me and my mistakes as his mistakes, and that he wanted to save me from my own mistakes. That was like the biggest theme that I remember. But again, that was all fading, and it was just love. It was just love there in those phone calls, and you know, we did get to go to his last birthday, you know, before he passed. And I know he passed in peace. You know, I know that. And you know, I inherited his apartment. So I live in the apartment that he didn't go to anymore after several years. He was like, he couldn't drive, you know, because he didn't remember the streets, and he liked being in Florida, and you know, that was all well and good. But so again, like you had said, if underneath all that there was love in him, then that was just confirmation that that's the same thing with me and everybody else. Anything you see on the surface, whatever slights or things that you begin to imagine about somebody, it's really, we're all the same underneath all that. And we are all just love in disguise. And then we wake up, oh, that's what I really am. And then we go back to sleep. And oh, that's what I really am, go back to sleep. But you know, what I feel is that and I get very emotional sometimes when I feel what Dazzle had said about, you know, I'm the one who made the prison and sailed out to that island. I did that. I innocently, I didn't realize what I was doing. And any moments that I'm doing it now, it's just, I just don't know. But when all that drops away, there's no need to love yourself because you already are love. It's like you just forget. And we're in a process of remembering and awakening. And I get emotional when I feel that freedom, right? It's like such a contrast to maybe how I was beating myself up in a particular moment or getting upset about something, and then all of a sudden this freedom from that is so emotional that I sometimes I feel like I'm becoming a mush, like really mushy. And like back to what Derek was saying, so what does it mean to be a man? You know, you're not supposed to be mushy, you know. And it's like, the hell with what you're supposed to be. I would rather have those emotions and those feelings and feel, because it's beauty. It's feeling the beauty of what is really who we are, right? I mean, that, you know, I think that can make anyone emotional and feel that in a particular moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's only whatever judgments I put on it. So, and being able to be of service and listen to somebody and just fall back from all that I think that I am and just be there and listen. I mean, what a gift I can give to somebody, and maybe awaken the fact that they're the same thing too. So anyway, that's really I got a lot out of today's conversation. So I want to tell you I really appreciate you guys. I really do.
Appreciate you, Mark. It was beautiful, very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And
Yes.
you reminded me just there at the end that when we're in service to others, that's the best way to serve ourselves too. You know, when we're in service to others, when we're thinking of others, or when we're listening to others, when we're not thinking, that's we're getting that blessing too. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I was talking to Jack Pransky the other day, and he was saying, Sid said you can't give love away, because the minute you give it away, it's coming back to you double. But you can't give it away because you're just getting
So
more.
true.
It's just like, oh, okay, I see that.
So true. And for years and years, Dazzle talked about how he you know he put that barrier around him of using love. I clung to love, thinking it was, going to run out, and that if I got a bit over there, then I had to hold on to it strongly and not let it go. And that exhibited, the symptoms of that were jealousy and possessiveness and insecurity, and not nice at all. But I didn't know any better. And then when I found out that the more you love, the more comes back, and soon you find you're just drowning in the damn stuff. I was like, why didn't someone tell me that before?
Sorry, do you know what you've just kind of shown me as well, Mark, when you were sharing your story? Because I've done the same. My mum passed away before I was arrested on my last sentence, and I sort of was in the hospital with her, nursing her, or with her just for the 2 months, and we never get on, a fractious relationship. Like, yeah, I didn't even think I loved the woman, and thought she didn't love me. But it's like the way you just said it, Mark, that outer crust all just fell away just in one instant. And we got issues with a sister who she hadn't spoke to for years. All of whatever the issues were just fell away. Right now, you were that loving daughter from, I remember when you was 13, and I used to, and yep, son, you're the this and but I didn't know then. It's like what you're saying. I'm just witnessing the true her now. I thought, oh, she's put the real her down for a minute, and now she's just being nice, and now she's just not employed. But no, the real her sort of just came out. And I didn't know I could have access to that. And then I found myself to have access to that, to know that I am that love. I'm kind of seeing that different now. All that little 2 months, that was like the real her. She just knew what love she knew. And it's the same thing. She used to say to me, oh, I love you, Junior, I love you. I'll be like, yeah, Mom, be quiet, man. And she'd be like, no, you know what? I knew you would be the one here for me, because basically I used to wake up early in the morning. I stopped doing what I was doing for that 2 months. Used to wake up early in the morning, and then I used to go over there at 9 o'clock and not leave the hospital till about 10 o'clock. And she would say, oh, Junior, I always knew that you'd be the one that was there for me. You know that you're always my little boy. And just seeing that now and feeling that, and oh man, yeah, just knowing that was just pure love on her state. That was beautiful. Thank you for that, Mark. I think Jill's got something.
Yeah, did you want to say something, Jill?
Yeah, I was just listening to Mark and thinking what a wonderful gift it is to be able to really listen to somebody, and listen without judgment or opinions or anything else. Just to be able to listen to somebody with love and compassion and acceptance, and that's where the feeling of love comes from for me. It's not saying this very well, but in sharing, just listening has amazing effect on other people. And after I'd been chatting this, we'd had our walk and we'd chatted for about 4 hours, and we hadn't really talked about needing to love ourselves or anything like that. And we talked about loads of things. And as she was going, I said, well, what have you got anything in particular out of what we've been talking about? And she said, yeah, I need to be much kinder to myself. And that was really lovely. Just that she was beginning to feel that she was worthy of love, and love for herself.
That's beautiful. You're on mute, Terry.
But that's another crazy thing there, Jill. That's what you just said, because somehow as well, when you said it, it never compute. But then I remember I used to think like that, like I wasn't deserved of love. Like, where did that one come from? All right, so I might have to hold on to my love, but somehow I've worked out in my head, I'm not even deserved of this little love that I'm holding on to. So every time it gets hurt, it's meant to happen to me, or it's meant, like, the things that, just to know that, wow, how we separate. And that is my thinking, what done that. Nothing more than my thinking, taking things in and thinking it means something that it didn't even mean. And then tell myself, convince myself, and not be kind to myself. And convince myself that, yeah, I'm definitely that person who's not deserved of love. And you know, I've never thought anybody else would be thinking that. I'm the only one, I'm the worst one in the world. I'm the one that been singled out and said, you don't deserve love. Look at that nice couple over there. Look at them look at them smiling. Look how everyone's happy. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And when you're listening to somebody else and you get that feeling of love and kindness and compassion or whatever, it's sort of realize that that's who you really are, behind all those, as I said before, all those labels, and you can be in that sort of loving feeling, and it's so comfortable and lovely.
Sorry.
Sorry, and it was obviously coming over to her in some way, that she was worthy of love, and she said that, you know, she really hated herself for doing various things, but the realization that she needed to be kinder to herself, I thought was lovely, really.
Do you know how I see that happening? I just realized it from the other day. Now I see that happening on a mass scale, like where we all get beyond that point just for a glimpse. You know, like when that terrible incident happened in Turkey and Syria, and we're all watching. For me personally, when I'm watching that, I go beyond all my personal issues, the rent that I have to pay, the person that I have to go and see that I don't really like. All of that is off the table for a moment, just for a moment, while my soul just connects with all those 40 or how many thousands of souls I've got, just for a moment. And I feel that love, I feel that compassion, I feel it. And if I had the means and the capacity, I'd probably be over there pulling rocks out as well, if it was just around the corner, if it was something like, because I know that's what I would be compelled to do. If I had the money, or if I had the thing, I would send or do whatever, because however way I feel I could help, it comes from that feeling of, I'm not important right now. And that's how I see it, because I have no thinking about anything other than or just pure love for the whole situation and the whole of what I'm seeing. And I used to, for me, it used to show up when I gave a homeless person money, and I know, wow, I get that feeling, when not even money, when I could buy them something to eat or something. But to see it on that big scale there, I know that's something we could all really sort of relate to.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Jill. So, has anybody else got anything? So I was just going to round this up with a little bit of Sid. And before I do, so I wanted to just say, I'm sort of guided to say, because I was the person who couldn't find this, no matter where I looked. And if it seems difficult to you, or if you ever feel like, well, I could never get there, or well, you know, that's all well and good, but how do you do that, or any of those types of things, to me, the way to access any of this good stuff that's been talked about, and we all talk about it in our individual ways, is to find your quiet. So wherever and whenever you can, find your quiet. Your quiet might be listening to Led Zeppelin and you know, lying on your bed listening to Led Zeppelin, where your mind drops out of itself. It doesn't have to be, you know, on a mountaintop. But wherever your quiet is, find those spots as regular as you can, where you can let your mind, where your mind settles. And the more often that you do that, the more often you can, because it's always there. But by doing that, you get to see it more, or glimpse it more, or hear it more. And you might not recognize what it sounds like, but the quiet will help you. So that's hopefully a practical thing to share with you. And I'll leave you with this one paragraph from Sid Banks, who we've been talking about, from his book, The Missing Link. Just take a moment to relax and hear this, and then we'll end. This is from the chapter called Mind. Every human mind has direct access to its experience here on earth, and the human mind always has access to its own spiritual roots from whence it came. Every human mind has direct access to its experience here on earth, and the human mind always has access to its own spiritual roots from whence it came.
Recording stopped. The recording has stopped.